It wasn't the first time that Mike Download, whose real name was Jeff Briggs, not the one he'd been living under since he was forced to leave his home state, hated hiding and pretending to be a law-abiding citizen. Why, you ask? It's simple. Mike, or Jeff Briggs as he was actually called, was not a good boy growing up. He joined a biker gang as soon as he got his first driver's license. Has he encountered problems with the law? Undoubtedly, and he really liked it. However, his parents, whom he truly loved, tried to prevent his younger brother from following his path. And he agreed with them. The life he led was not for his brother. He knew that this world would simply tear him apart and spit him out without hesitation. Perhaps he did terrible things, such as smuggling weapons, prohibited substances, bookmarking hiding places, and so on. But that didn't mean he didn't care about his family. This was life for him, and no one could change his mind. However, one night his brother ran into the house, desperate and scared to death. It was easy to see from his face. It only took Mike 30 minutes to get him to understand what he had done. He saw the horror on his parents' faces. Mike knew he was never going to be an academic who went to college and got a six-figure salary or anything like that, and he was okay with that. He loved his life as it was at that moment. However, even he understood that if the police caught his brother, his life would be ruined forever. So Mike did the only thing he could for his brother. He took the blame upon himself. It wasn't difficult. With his encounters with the police, he would be a natural suspect. He knew that if he did this, he would have to run away, sever all ties with his family, and live constantly looking over his shoulder until the statute of limitations on the crime expired. He knew he had to act quickly, so his goodbye to his parents was short and sweet. He hugged them tightly, not knowing if he would ever see them again. He nodded as his father gave him all the cash he and his mother had at the time, hearing his mother cry in the kitchen as he and his brother hugged one last time. He was a hardened criminal. His brother wouldn't last a week in a penal colony. Mike just hoped that this act would show him that he was not cut out for the life he led. He'd like to say that leaving everything and everyone he knew behind in Rio Rancho was easy, but who was he kidding? This included the girl he really loved, Rory Salas. She was the daughter of his gang leader. He knew that she loved him too. He just hoped that he could convince her to join him as he left his home and the new life that awaited him. Alas, it was not meant to be, not that he could blame her. After all, they were only 18 years old. Mike would like to say that it didn't hurt him, but that would be a lie. Using his bike as collateral for the fake documents he needed for his life on the run, which took days to produce so that they could pass the scrutiny of the police if he were stopped along the way to wherever he went. He knew they were looking for him, given the wanted poster that was playing on all the news channels. After 2 days of waiting and hiding in the basement of one of Mike's gang members, he was driven at night to Texas, where his motorcycle family had raised enough money for a bus ticket to anywhere he wanted to go and a few $1,000s so he could survive on his own. He wanted to say goodbye to Rory, but he knew that the police were watching everyone he interacted with, so one of the new gang members drove him across state lines. How he will miss everyone when he steps onto that bus and into the unknown. So, after several long days of travel due to many stops along the way, Mike found himself in Reading, Pennsylvania when he stepped off the bus and into his new life. Throughout the trip, he practiced his new name and how to sign it. He knew that the first thing he had to do was find a place to live and a job. The money he had wouldn't last long. He just hoped the police wouldn't be looking for him here, so far from New Mexico. So, at the age of 18, Jeff Briggs began his new life as Mike Download. He knew he couldn't go back to his old life. It will simply attract too much attention. He wasn't going to let his little brother rot in a cell. He knew his old gang respected that. It was luck, actually, when he came across a motorcycle store. With his experience tuning his old Harley that his father bought him, he knew how to handle the engine. If Mike believed in luck, which he didn't, he would have said he got lucky when he saw the gang tattoos on the store owner's arm while talking to him. Although they weren't from the same fraternity, when Mike lifted the sleeve of his shirt to reveal his gang tattoo, a pleased smile appeared on the man's lips. You see, the store was just a front for their gang to launder illegally earned money by doing things that society deems illegal. Even if the applicant had all the necessary skills, he would still not be hired, given the nature of the store. When Mike explained who he was and why he was there, he was hired that same day. Of course, the man did not immediately start working on motorcycles. No, he was hired to clean the store to make it look presentable so as not to arouse suspicion, and he was not asked to join their gang. Mike simply couldn't take the risk. However, he missed the camaraderie he had with his former gang, although his boss allowed him to live in a small attic above the offices. He washed himself in the bathroom sink for several months until he saved enough money to buy a furnished apartment. He didn't care that she was in a bad part of town. He had long been accustomed to such things. It was the beginning of his adult life and the slow death from normal life that was eating away at his soul. It had been 7 boring, tiring years since he ran away from his home and everyone he knew. True, he received a mechanic's license to work on motorcycles in the shop, which brought him almost $40,000 a year. He also got married. After all, he must have seemed like an ordinary guy. That was 3 years ago. Her name was Evelyn, or Eve for short, Pace, and still he was not impressed with his so-called wife, if he could even call her that. Their problems, technically her problems, started months ago. He was no fool. He knew she was cheating on him, not that he cared. He really didn't love her. His heart still belonged to Rory. He assumed it would always be like this. Eve was just a cover for him. So, driving up to the house they had bought in both their names, in the car he hated driving so much, Mike felt like a sardine in a can. He longed for the open road, the wind in his hair, the roar of his motorcycle engine, the freedom that it brought, at least in his mind. That's why, in his free time, when his prostitute wife thought he didn't know what she was doing, he worked on a 46 flathead, which he bought and slowly restored by the time this shame he lived in will finally stop. However, he was only waiting for the statute of limitations to expire before returning to the life he once knew. To the woman he hoped was still waiting for him, just as he was waiting for her. It doesn't matter if he can't return to his old gang. Everything else would fall into place if he had Rory. Over the past 2 months, Eve's attitude towards him had become rather arrogant. She always criticized his work, although this did not stop her from wasting his money on all sorts of nonsense, which he considered really nonsense, and he told her about it. Eve didn't like it. Again, he didn't care what she thought. Walking into his home, counting down the months until the statute of limitations expired, loudly closing the front door, hearing voices from their bedroom, he was indifferent to who she slept with. Since he noticed her lies and tricks, he has not touched Eve. Mike was a little sad about this. Eve wasn't the best in bed. She wasn't the worst either. Seeing the smirk on the man's face as he walked out of their bedroom, Mike knew who it was, her boss. He also noted the attitude on the face of his wife, who followed him. "Aren't you going to say anything?" Eve asked, wondering why her husband didn't explode like she thought. "Why should I? A woman of easy virtue has finally shown herself," Mike replied contemptuously. "Now it's just. If you want to get out of here in one piece, I suggest you shut up," Mike said in a very cold and threatening tone. "I think, given that your wife has all the money, you shouldn't risk what you have little by sleeping with this cheap woman of easy virtue," he said, nodding at Eve, who was glaring furiously at her boss. "Listen here, you damn mechanic," her boss growled, approaching him. "Just work on your wife like a good little cuckold," he declared, poking Mike in the chest. It wasn't a very wise decision on his part, considering the blow sent him flying backwards into the wall. "You stupid cretin, you thought you could come to my house, thought you could have sex with my wife in my bed and get out of here unharmed," Mike shouted as the man tried to defend himself. "Run, you little coward." Mike laughed darkly, watching the man back away along his lawn. "Oh, and tell Anne I'll see her on Monday. She's a wonderful woman, especially when she's on top of me," he said, referring to the man's wife, whom he was lucky enough to sleep with. "You are lying." "What, you thought you and that woman of easy virtue were invisible? You're a fool," Mike sighed, shaking his head. "Who do you think told her about your cheating, huh? he asked with a cruel, evil smile on his lips. Enjoy being poor, because by Thursday you're history. Mike's laughter filled the air as the man ran to his car to see if he still had a marriage to go back to, which he didn't, considering that at that moment his wife was burning everything that belonged to the man all in their front yard, turning his head, feeling the tension leave his muscles he had earned over years of working with the wrench. The weightlifting bench in their garage didn't hurt either. That and his nearly restored motorcycle were the only two things, other than tools, that dominated their one-car garage. His boots clattered on the porch boards as he walked into the house, seeing his wife flinch from the loud slamming of the door. "Mike." "Shut your lying mouth, bitch," Mike growled. "The only thing I want from you is silence." Watching as she quickly closed her mouth, true fear blazing in her eyes. Not surprising, considering this was the first time she had seen him angry. "Call your sister, tell her to come. I need her," he said, heading to their bedroom to put all his things away. "What?" Eve roared. "You're cheating. You cheated first, you destroyed this marriage, whatever it was, you opened the door." Mike spat, gathering his clothes. "Who do you think I spend my Tuesdays and Thursdays with when you're hanging out with the girls?" he asked, showing quotation marks in the air. "Believe me, she's much better in bed than you've ever been," Mike said, twisting the knife even further. "You're a pathetic excuse for a man," Eve screamed, rising to the top of her lungs as he carried his clothes into the guest bedroom. "If you were anything more than a mechanic, I wouldn't have to look anywhere else." She tried to hurt him. "Weird," Mike mused, looking at the ceiling, noticing how his wife was angry that her ridicule was not affecting him as she expected. "The fact that I'm a mechanic didn't stop Anne, who, by the way, is rich, from having sex with me. Oh, and I would start looking for a new job if I were you," he said, smiling from ear to ear at Eve's bewildered look. "Who do you think owns this company? Certainly not that idiot. Do you really think you'll have a job in a few days?" Mike asked, plunging the knife even deeper into his soon-to-be ex-wife. "Mike, it wasn't supposed to be like this," Eve said, realizing that she was standing on a collapsing bridge and could not stop the fire that was spreading, consuming him while she stood in the middle of the flames. "It was just sex. It didn't mean anything. I promise I won't do it again." Her anger increased as Mike snorted, stumbling as he pushed her away before re-entering their bedroom. "I don't care. You're just a woman of easy virtue, and not a very good one, by the way," Mike said, leaving the bedroom, loaded with even more clothes. "So go spread your legs like the town slut that you are, because that's the only way you'll make an income in the coming months after our divorce." "Then get out of my house," Eve screamed. "It won't work, bitch, until this house is sold." "I'm not leaving," Mike said, glad that he had been saving money from paychecks since the day he noticed her cheating. He was also grateful to his boss, who asked the accountant to open the account under a different name so that his wife would not know about it. "So, get used to seeing my ass, bitch," he said, dragging behind him the case he bought 7 years ago, which contained all the things from his past life. "You stupid son of a bitch, you just had to cause trouble, didn't you? You couldn't let me have what I wanted, right? It never hurt you. You had plenty." "When was the last time I touched you willingly?" Mike asked, looking back at her. "2 months, if you couldn't see it. You're dumber than I thought," he said coldly, watching Eve's face turn red. "So go ahead and call your sister. I want to celebrate." "Damn you." "No, thanks," shuddering at the thought. "There's no telling what that guy has," Mike said, laughing evilly as he walked into the guest bedroom. "Wait, she's calling," he shouted as his cell phone rang in his pocket. "Hey, how's it going?" he replied, placing the case at the foot of his bed. "Do not dare," Eve screamed as she ran into the room. "I won't let some piece of shit like you ruin her marriage," she hissed, snatching his phone from his hand, groaning in pain as Mike landed on top of her as he fell onto the bed. "Now get out of my room, bitch," Mike growled, ripping the phone out of her hand. "Hey, sorry about that. Yeah, she's a dumb bitch. Didn't even notice the panties you left behind last time." He laughed as he left the room to get a beer. "Yes, I'm free. Come, I'll make you a baby." "What?" Eve screamed when she came to her senses. What? It's just sex. It doesn't mean anything, Mike said, using Eve's words against her as she ran into the kitchen. Yeah, I know, bullshit. She thought I'd fall for that crap, he said, getting a beer from the fridge. Tia, don't do this, Eve shouted so that her sister could hear, watching as Mike lowered the phone and turned it towards her. Sis, I'll only say this once. You're an idiot. Eve's head fell back at her sister's words. You better get yourself a good lawyer because Mike already talked to your mom about your cheating. She was more than willing to represent him if it wasn't a conflict of interest for her. I don't know what came over you or what that piece of crap was up to. You cheat on your husband. It couldn't have been sex, considering how Mike did this to me all the time. And no, I'm not cheating on my husband. Chaz knows about all the times Mike and I had sex. It was Chaz's idea. From the very beginning, since he cannot have children due to a birth defect, and I thought, why not? Better than spending money on fertility doctors and insemination procedures. God, he is so great at sex. Sister, I advise you to get used to being alone, because it will happen. Mom will ensure it. But you know how Mom feels about cheaters. You should have known she wouldn't be happy to hear about it, considering how her first husband cheated on her. So don't expect any sympathy from her, Dad, or me. But he's just a damn mechanic, Eve complained. So what? Are you judging Dad because he's just a plumber? What? No, why should I? Eve asked, horrified at the thought. Then why are you so eager to judge Mike for his work? Why do you have such hatred for what your husband does? It certainly wasn't there when you dated him. Was that asshole telling you this? Don't talk about Stan like that. He's good. Sister, you're a stupid bitch. If he were a good man, he wouldn't sleep with a married woman. No, he's not a good man. He's a piece of shit. And sister, I love you and all, so do you. So don't expect sympathy from me, Chaz, Mom, or Dad. You brought this world of pain upon yourself voluntarily. I will be here for you and everything when you are served with divorce papers on Monday. Divorce, Eve screamed. What did you think was going to happen? Did you really think Mike would put up with you cheating on him? Did that idiot tell you all this bullshit? Because I know you were once a pretty smart woman. Now I don't think I even know you at all. And honestly, I don't think I want to, if you can do this to the person you said you love. You're not the sister I remember. Mike, I need to make dinner for Chaz. I'll be there in 2 hours. Will that suit you? Of course, I'll try not to hurt you too much, Mike said, smiling wickedly at his wife, who was looking at him with hatred. Oh no, you'll do it like always, Tia said, hearing her flirty laugh. See you then. I have something you'll like. Mike, please don't do this. This is my sister. Eve begged him, but she was met with an indifferent look, wondering why she hadn't noticed it before. I'll only say this once. Maybe, just maybe, it will get through to your stupid brain. No, Mike said in a cold, lifeless tone. Any thought or concern for you went out the window the moment you opened the door for that asshole. If I were you, I'd be more worried about what's ahead for you, considering you'll be out of work, and knowing Anne, who owns your company, will make sure you never, ever work in this industry again, at least not in this city. You can't know that. Oh, I can, you see. She's quite vindictive when she gets betrayed. She told me about what she was going to do to you and all his other women after I had sex with her every Monday and Wednesday. What's it like to know that you destroyed a family, although you were not the first and not the last woman that idiot slept with? You should have known that he slept with 2 other women besides you. Oh, okay, you really should get it checked, Mike said, seeing Eve's very shocked face when he told her this. I would suggest that you not be here when Tia arrives, but that would mean that I care, and I do care. Do you love me? Asked Eve. Her indignation grew when Mike nearly spat out his beer. Love you? Seriously? No, I agreed to you, Mike said, finally revealing the truth. Honestly, I'll be glad when this marriage ends and you end up on the street, selling your body to survive. Shrugging as Eve began to cry and ran into his former bedroom, slamming the door behind her. Stupid bitch, he muttered, taking another sip of his beer. He opened the Facebook app and scrolled through his family's page, knowing that they had made sure that he had at least some connection with them, even if it was indirect. Seeing his brother's happy smile, a few gray hairs that now adorned his father's hair. Mike thought his father looked pretty decent with them, and his mother looked beautiful in the dress she wore for their wedding anniversary before his father took her to dinner. What stopped his heart was one message Rory left on his family's page, which read, "Come back, baby, come back to me. It's been so long. I don't know if I can wait any longer to find you myself." Typing out a response using a false identity he created to communicate with the family occasionally, but not too often so the police wouldn't become suspicious if they were monitoring their social media. However, if Rory wrote something that was clearly intended for him, it told him that the police were no longer looking for him. Closing the application, he dialed a number that had not called for 7 long years. "Hey, it's me." "Jeffrey!" His mother gasped in shock as the connection was made. A smile lifted the corners of his lips when he heard his real name after all these years. He then became a little worried as he heard the phone rattling and falling to the floor as his mother passed out. "Hello, hello, who is this, and what did you do to my wife?" His father barked into the phone, checking on Cadden. "Hey, Dad, is Mom okay?" Mike asked worriedly. "Jeffrey, son, is it really you?" Mike heard his father's voice tremble. "Yes, it's me. Is Mom okay?" "She'll be fine." Mike's heart skipped a beat when he heard that soft, sweet, exciting voice speaking to his father. "I wonder what she was doing there. Hello, Jeff." "Hey, Rory," Mike replied, his voice cracking, causing her to giggle sweetly. "Did you read my message?" "Yes, he read it. I've missed you every day since you left." "No more than me." Do you still love me?" "Since the day I first met you," Jeff replied, reverting to his real name, now that he was determined to return to his hometown as soon as his divorce was finalized. "Then come home, come back to me." "Oh, I already planned it," Jeff said firmly. "Okay." Jeff felt how excited he was by her purring, hoping that everything will work out when he returns to his hometown. "Where are you anyway?" "I don't know if it's smart to say this on the phone," Jeff said, rubbing the back of his head. "Relax, the police are not looking for you anymore. Some pyromaniac took the blame a few years ago when he copied how that fire was set." "Is it true?" "Meechum, so tell me, big guy, where are you?" Memories of their first time flashed through his mind at the sensual tone that filled his ear. "Reading, Pennsylvania." "It's clear. Well, don't keep me waiting, Jeff. Do you know what will happen if I have to drag you home myself?" "I might like this," Jeff replied with a playful smile. "Hope so. Here, talk to your parents." Returning the house phone to his father, not realizing that at that moment Rory was calling at work, telling the hospital where she worked as a nurse that she would be gone for 2 weeks. If she gets fired, she doesn't care. They needed her more than she needed them at that moment. She wasn't going to wait. She was going to get her man back, and to hell with those who stood in her way. Calling her father, she knew he knew where Jeff was in reading, having received the information he needed. She swung her leg over the bike, feeling the engine vibrate as she started it. She quietly left the entrance of her future relatives and headed to her place to pack her things. She knew he got married, but she also knew Jeff didn't love her. Not the way she knew he loved her. What her father told her from the source he spoke to was that Jeff was getting too much attention by being single and the money he was making, so he had to get married as a cover to deflect suspicion. Now that she will be in his life forever, just like she should have been 7 years ago. She had no intention of following in his ex-wife's footsteps. She was specifically going to rub her nose in how she mistreated her man. Jeff was working on building a custom motorcycle engine the following Monday. A few hours ago, he received a call that Eve had been notified at work. From what the spies in her office told him, Stan's face was all swollen as he gathered his things before being escorted out of the building. As Anne said, as much as she wanted to fire Eve for what she did, Anne thought it would be too easy for her. So Anne was going to make Eve's life hell for the near future, until she couldn't take it anymore and quit. What he knew meant that Anne would give Eve the worst, dirtiest jobs in her company without breaking any laws. This meant very late nights for her, which he took advantage of until the divorce was finalized, and he could leave reading. Jeff ignored the sound of a motorcycle approaching the store. He was, after all, in a motorcycle shop. They must have had a dozen or so coming and going all day as he used a digital caliper to make sure the part in his hand met the required specifications for the engine. He ignored the whistle that filled the store. The only thing he thought about was that in 60 days he would be free from his cheating wife. He couldn't wait for this day. That's when he heard something he didn't think he'd hear until he left that part of his life far behind. Turning his head towards the whistle, his digital caliper fell from his hand as his eyes widened at the sight before him. There, at the entrance to the store, with her hands folded on the handlebars of her motorcycle, sat Rory on her Kawasaki Vulcan's abs. Her dark green eyes sparkled as her lush lips curled into a smile, her ebony hair pulled back into a ponytail. Jeff struggled as she deliberately showed her ass while getting off the bike. Noting the tattoos adorning her forearms, not that it mattered, he just wondered where else she had tattoos, and if he could trace them with his lips. Her t-shirt showed off her 32C breasts, which he had dreamed of since he had to leave her when he left home, and her blue jeans hugged her hips, which swayed as she walked into the store. His hand instinctively reached out as he put the piece down, turning towards her. His heart beat in his throat as her hands cupped his face and pulled him in for a kiss. Hearing whoops and screams from his coworkers when Rory kissed him. "Hey, baby, did you miss me?" Rory purred, her green eyes burning with love that had not faded in the 7 years they had been apart. "You can't even imagine it," Jeff answered honestly. "That's what I wanted to hear," Rory said with a sly smile on her lips. Her body warmed up. She couldn't wait to explore every inch of her man. Wrapping her arms around his waist, she whispered, "Do you think you can leave early? We have so much to discuss," she purred. "Go, get out of here. You're no use to me with that stupid smile on your face," his boss said with a smirk. "Come back in 2 weeks. If you come back at all," he said over his shoulder as he left for the office. "Show me this house," Rory said, backing away, holding his hands as she walked towards her motorcycle. "Yes, I know everything about that woman of easy virtue you married. I think it was a trial marriage before you marry the one you're supposed to be with. On me." Rory had a sly smile on his lips at Jeff's stunned look. "So get in this car because I need you," she said lustfully, receiving shouts of approval from the men who were watching. A sexy smile spread across her lips. However, she wasn't going to let Jeff spend the night in jail for indecent exposure. Reluctantly, Jeff slowly lowered Rory back to his feet, noting the way Rory bit her bottom lip as he adjusted himself in front of her. Seeing the fire in her eyes, knowing that part of him would be well taken care of once they got to his house. Noting the red tint to her cheeks as they locked eyes again as he opened the car door. All thoughts of Eve vanished from his mind as he looked into Rory's eyes. The only woman he had missed since he met her. After driving for 30 minutes to make sure Rory didn't get lost, they arrived at his house. Parking in Eve's spot without worrying about her screaming when she gets home. Watching as Rory stopped the motorcycle next to him before getting out of the car. Noting the way her eyes roamed around the house as he walked around his car. Knowing he would sell it before leaving reading. "Give me a minute and you can put your motorcycle in the garage," Jeff said, seeing her nod, before heading towards the front door of his house. The garage door rose easily on its tracks. Noting how her eyes were glued to his 46 Indian flathead, ready for the day of his exodus. Not realizing that the moment the garage door rose, Rory's pants also fell. When he turned around, there she was, sitting on his desk. "I've been waiting for this for 7 long years," Rory whispered. "And I dreamed about it every day too," Jeff said. "I hope the tattoos aren't too much for you," Rory whispered as Jeff's eyes roamed over her now naked body. Feeling goosebumps as Jeff looked at the heart that sat in the valley of her breasts, his initials in the center of it. It was her way of telling every man that no one would ever capture her heart the way Jeff does. "I made it for you," she said in a dreamy voice, looking at him. "You did?" Mitchum, I may have slept with other men while you were away, how you married that prostitute, but no one has ever held my heart the way it yearns for you, Rory said, laying out the truth. The past doesn't matter anymore. You're here now, and I'll be damned if I ever let you go again, Jeff said with conviction, claiming her lips with his. You're on birth control, right? Jeff asked. No, Rory purred with a sly smile. I'm going to give birth to your baby, just like I always planned, she said, her voice filled with love. Then we'll get married and forget about all this, Rory said, waving her hand around. Now come on, let's take a shower, and then we can do it in your bed, she said, smiling at him as she slid off the table, feeling the same connection they shared years ago forming again as she led him into the house. Eve grumbled as she entered the house to grab a quick snack during her lunch break, knowing that Mike, as she knew him, was right, or at least partially right, about her work. Frowning when she first smelled it, the smell of sex in the air, her eyes went to the guest bedroom, walking up to her quietly, placing his ear lightly against the door. Sadness washed over her when she heard the sound of Mike with some woman in the room, knowing that now that she was notified they were technically separated and she couldn't say anything about it. She knew he only stayed in the house until it was sold. Looking down, wondering what came over her, that she was under Stan's spell. Her co-workers had to hold her back when he said she meant nothing to him, that she was just a piece of meat, while he tried to save his job and his marriage. She really loved Mike, and it really hurt her when he said he just settled for her. However, she couldn't deny that she had brought herself to this point. Eve also knew that Mike would never forgive her for what she did. She knew that she would have to live with her shame for the rest of her life. She just hoped that Mike would find someone who would treat him better than she had in the last months of their marriage. She quietly entered the kitchen, made a sandwich, placed it and some chips in separate Ziploc bags, then walked out the door as quietly as she had entered, so as not to disturb Mike and his guest, crying all the way back to the office, knowing that it was all her fault. But that didn't lessen the pain of knowing that her husband was currently with another woman in their house. The house they both chose together. The house where she had so many dreams for the two of them. Her sobs intensified as her memory flashed back to the months she had humiliated her husband. The anger she saw, the words he spoke, and that indifferent look on his face flashed before her eyes. She hit the steering wheel with her hands, knowing that she herself was the cause of her pain. The root of her marriage that failed is the reason that her husband is now with another woman in their house. Wondering what was wrong with her that she fell so easily under the influence of this liar, thinking how he could fool her so easily, looking at the divorce papers that were on the passenger seat, taking them, signing his name with shaking hands, praying that with this act Mike could start a new life, even if it wasn't with her. Eve just hoped that in time she could find someone else who would look past her past mistakes and give her another chance to be happy again, like she was with Mike before she became stupid and fell under the spell of a predator. She wasn't going to fight him. They had very little to share. She knew that their marriage would end in 60 days and she would have to start her life over again, alone. Putting that aside, realizing that her married life was over, Eve couldn't believe how stupid she was. She always thought that she was a good, decent woman, that she would never do what she did, especially to her husband. She could only blame herself for falling under Stan's influence, taking his lunch from the passenger seat, praying that one day, Mike would be able to find the strength to forgive her for what she did to them. She hoped that whoever he found after the divorce would be kind to him and treat him the way he deserved, and not the way she had been in recent months. Sighing as she approached the entrance of her workplace, bracing herself for the taunts her co-workers would throw at her, she also brought this on herself, hoping that she could learn from this and never be deceived by such a man again. So, picking up the sandwich Jeff had made for her, her legs resting on his lap as they sat on his couch. So, Jeff joked. How long have you had this flat head? Rory asked. It took a year to slowly restore it. I planned to drive home in it when the divorce was completed. Why? He's ready? Rory asked curiously. For the trip home? Jeff asked, seeing her nod. Yes, I finally got the gas tank from the painters on Saturday. That was the last part I needed to get. Okay, maybe you can take your girlfriend for a walk, Rory joked with a sly smile on her lips. My girlfriend, huh? Jeff laughed. Meacham, Rory purred, munching on her sandwich. Maybe I'll take it, Jeff chuckled. So, may I ask why you were at my parents' house? Oh, well, her face turned red under his gaze. I went there almost every day, just hoping that they heard something from you. You have no idea how often I just wanted to get on my motorcycle and ride off to find you. To hold you, to feel you close to me, like I did when we were teenagers. I wish you had done this, then these last 3 years wouldn't have been so bad, Jeff said, seeing the curious look in her eyes. Was being married that bad? Well, I always felt bad that I led Eve by the nose when I never loved her. Of course I liked her, but it was never like what we had, and I hope we have again, Jeff said, seeing the fire in her eyes at his words. Oh, you better believe we will, Rory said decisively. So how long have you had this bike? Some years. He's good and all that. Nice trip, but it's not the same without you around like it was then, Rory replied, blushing into her plate. So why don't you just leave and come home with me now? Do you really need to stay here until the end? She asked, watching as Jeff tilted his head back thoughtfully. Well, no, I don't think it's necessary, not if I give someone here power of attorney to manage my affairs, Jeff said thoughtfully after a minute of reflection. But what about my things? We can rent one of those U-Haul containers and send it to your parents, and when we get there, we store it in a unit or something until we find a bigger house for us, Rory said excitedly, becoming more confident that this is the right decision. I will need to find out what jobs are available at home, contact my parents to see if they will allow me to stay. Oh no, big guy, you're going to live with me, Rory said firmly. Do you think I went through these 7 years just to live away from you? She asked with a reproachful look. I assume you have your own place? Meacham, Rory confirmed. I live in a nice complex on Crenshaw, she explained. Is it true? But weren't these apartments exorbitantly priced when we were looking for places to live after school? Oh, they're not cheap, I agree, but they're really good. And how can you afford it? I'm a nurse, Rory replied, feeling her body heat up as Jeff's gaze ran over her body. Oh, I bet you gave some old guys a few minor heart attacks, knowing they had such a sexy nurse, Jeff joked. Shut up, you idiot, Rory told him, kicking him lightly in the chest. But if you want a sexy nurse, I can oblige. I think I'll like this, Jeff said with a sinful smile. I hope so, Rory replied, finishing her sandwich. Then their heads turned to the sound of a cell phone coming from the garage. Oh shit. What's happened? Jeff said in surprise as Rory almost jumped off the couch and ran to the garage. I forgot to call your mom, Rory shouted, feeling her face turn red from the laughter that followed her words. Hey, Cadden, I know, sorry. Jeff heard her apology when she returned to the house. Yes, I found him. We, got a little distracted. Rory gave Jeff the middle finger when she noticed how he was trying not to laugh at how red her face was getting. I'm sure it was. Rory groaned at the playful tone and laughter that came from the phone. How is my boy? Is everything okay with him? Is he eating well? Oh, Jeff definitely takes care of himself. That's for sure, Rory replied, remembering how his muscles looked. When will he come home? Working on it right now. Fine. Tell my son he needs to be here tomorrow. I know the feeling, Cadden, Rory nodded, very pleased that she and her future in-laws got along so well. It might take a couple of days until we can leave. Jeff needs to take care of some things before we head home. Okay, I can wait if I know my boy is coming home. Oh, we'll be sure to come see you first when we get back to town. Handing the phone to Jeff. Here, your mom wants to talk to you. While you do that, I'll put on my pants and you'll take me on that motorcycle, she said, winking at him as she passed by. Hi, Mom. Jeffrey. Oh, honey, Can't you imagine how glad I am to hear your voice again? I know you almost fainted last time, Jeff joked. Quiet, Cadden laughed warmly. So, how is Dad? Oh, you know your father, nothing bothers him, but I heard him cry a little after your last call. You have no idea how much we've missed you all these years. Miss you too, Mom. All I ever wanted was to go home, Jeff admitted, his eyes darting to Rory, who was looking at him with the same sly smile. How is Adam? I hope he keeps his nose clean. Oh yes, he holds, Cadden reassured him. After that stunt 7 years ago, and what it cost us, Adam has never done anything like it again. He concentrated on his studies and got a place in a very good school. Another year or two, and it will be finished. He's home for the summer. I would have given him the phone, but he went to help your dad pick up something from the hardware store. You know how your father has to visit him at least once a week just to get something. I remember a lot of trips there, Jeff nodded, feeling Rory kiss his neck as she hugged him. You missed her so much, Rory whispered in his ear. So, when do you think you'll be coming home? I can't say. It depends on how quickly I can sell the things that I can't take with me. Then I will need to visit my lawyer and give him the authority to sell the house and complete the divorce in my absence. Advocate? Divorce? Son, don't tell me you got married. Kind of, Jeff admitted sheepishly. And why are you getting a divorce? She's been cheating on me for the past few months, and well, it's gone. This was never home to me, just a place to wait and hide until I could get back to where I belonged, Jeff said, looking at Rory. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry to hear that. I hoped she was a good girl and would treat you right. She was good until she started listening to the wrong person, and well, you know the result. Oh, it's your father calling. I better answer. You'll call me later, son. If I do this, you won't pass out again, right? Jeff joked. You won't let me forget this, will you? Not anytime soon, Jeff smiled. Tell Dad and Adam that I say hi to them, and I'll see them soon. I'll tell you, honey. Oh, he'll be so glad to hear that. We'll talk later, Jeffrey. I love you and miss you. Love you too, Mom. Looking at Rory as she took the phone from his hand and placed it in her pocket. Come on, big guy, and take your girl for a ride, Rory said playfully, winking. Oh, I planned it that way in more ways than one, Jeff said with a sinful smile. Only if you promise to take my pants off later, Rory purred, swaying her hips as she led him into the garage, holding the door open for him as Jeff rolled his Indian flathead into the sun. You've checked out this bike before, right? She asked, getting into the back seat as he closed the garage. Yes, it's safe, I assure you, Jeff said as the electric starter started the engine. Okay, Rory purred in his ear. Let's start homecoming, she sighed into his neck, wrapping her arms around his waist. Their first stop was at a U-Haul store, where they paid for 2 containers that would be delivered the next day to his home. Seeing how her eyes lit up when he invited her to sit in the front seat and drive the bike. You better hold on tight and press your body against me, Rory said, pushing her ass into his view as she swung her leg over the motorcycle after they left the U-Haul store. Oh, that's what I planned, Jeff said. All that mattered now was a second chance to be with Jeff, and she wasn't going to waste it like she had when she was 18. Giving him a nod that he would wait in the foyer as they reached his lawyer's office while he discussed his personal matters. What happened, Mike? We don't have a court date for another 3 weeks, the chubby man at the desk asked as Jeff sat down across from him. I need you to draw up a power of attorney to manage my affairs in the city. I also need you to draw up a document transferring my parental rights to Tia and Chaz Gilmore, Jeff said, noting the man's puzzled look. Are you planning to leave town? Asked the lawyer, sitting forward in his chair. No, I'm going back home where I belong, so I won't be here to handle whatever Eve tries to do to stop the divorce. Do you have a girlfriend waiting for you at home? The man asked with a smile. Something like that, Jeff nodded. Well, give me a few minutes to put this together for you, but it will cost, the man said, moving his mouse and turning on the computer, opening ready-made forms for such matters with a few clicks. His fingers moved across the keyboard, filling in the fields, explaining to Jeff that his services would cost $300, calling the secretary to swipe Jeff's card while his printer printed while he typed up his parents' paperwork. He personally did not know that Jeff, or Mike as he knew him, had or would have a child. But that didn't concern him. As long as the customer pays, that's all that matters. Calling the firm's notary when he finished all the forms, seeing how the secretary returned Jeff's card before he signed the documents, and how the notary put his stamp on the documents and signed them, making them legally binding. Just have them sign it and send it to me. Once that's done, I'll take care of the rest, the man said, handing Jeff an envelope containing documents that waived the rights to the child that had been or would be born. I will keep you posted on how things are going. I hope you find what you are looking for at home. Already found it, Jeff said with a warm smile, seeing as Rory heard his answer and wore the same satisfied smile on her lips, stuffing the envelope into her back pocket as Rory stood up. Where to go? Rory asked, taking his hand as they walked out of the lawyer's office. Well, you have to deliver it, then go into work and say I'm not coming back. Perhaps sell your instruments. No, don't do that. I'm sure we can find you a job at home, Rory said, clasping Jeff's arm, knowing that she would talk to her father to find a place for Jeff. She didn't want to go back to her old life. She just wanted to settle down, have Jeff's children, and live a good life without worrying about some enemy gang shooting up their house for something she or Jeff might do. You just need to get a license to work in the state, and that's it. So will you be okay marrying a mechanic? Jeff asked with a sly smile, seeing how the wind lifted her hair and her cheeks turned red. I don't care what you do. You could be a garbage man. I wouldn't care as long as I have you. That's what matters. Why? Did this woman make a fuss about it? Rory asked, her anger rising at how the woman mistreated her man as he nodded. I guess I'll have to find someone to take my toolbox home, Jeff mused. The drive to Tia's house was quick. Jeff already knew she was pregnant a month ago. She just didn't want to lose sex under the pretext of conceiving. He suspected Chaz knew about it, but didn't say anything. Why should he? Chaz had sex too, just not with his wife until Tia started showing. Then they will return to normal family life. He doubted it would happen, but that wasn't his problem. Rory narrowed her eyes at the way the woman looked at Jeff and the way she touched him. Also seeing the sadness in her eyes when Jeff said he was leaving in a few days, handing her an envelope. Listening to him say that this is a document transferring rights to the child growing inside her. We need to talk about this, believe me, Rory hissed as Jeff started the bike. Rory was just as angry as she waited for Jeff to come into work so she could tell her boss he wouldn't be coming back and ask for his toolbox to be delivered. She couldn't believe that he was going to father a child with this woman. If she had known, she would never have allowed him to give up his rights. In her opinion, this child belonged to her as much as it belonged to Jeff. She was going to make sure that Jeff had no feelings for this woman. She will not allow anyone else to claim his love. She survived 7 years of his absence and will not allow some other woman to take her man away. Although she gave up the biker life, it didn't mean she let go of the biker mentality. Rory sat on his bed, tapping her finger on his arm as she fumed as she watched Jeff pack his things to move. Hearing the washing machine work so you don't have to carry dirty clothes home. Okay, you want to tell me what's wrong? Jeff asked as he folded his clothes before putting them in the box he picked up from the grocery store after returning home from Tia's. Do you want to explain why you gave up your rights to a child you didn't tell me about? Rory asked, her voice rising. Because they can't have children, Jeff replied matter-of-factly. What? Her husband was born sterile, so when Tia, Eve's sister, found out about her cheating on me, she and Chaz, her husband, asked me to help them with the child. So I thought, why not? I wasn't going to stay here long anyway, and the child would never know about me. So that's why I gave up my rights, so they wouldn't think I'd come back and take the baby. Could you tell me? What would you like me to say, Rory? Oh, by the way, did I become the biological father? You could have clawed my eyes out like you want now, Jeff said, knowing it was true. But you don't love her, right? Rory asked. If he loved, she would quickly put an end to it. No, it was just sex, good sex, but that's it, Jeff said, sealing the box when it was full, signing it with a black marker. You are sure? Rory asked, not believing a word. Rory, the only woman I've ever loved is you, so take that jealous look out of your eyes. I see it hasn't changed in 7 years, Jeff said with a grin as he carried the box into the garage, where his toolbox awaited the arrival of U-Haul containers, which were to be picked up that same day and delivered to his parents' house. I decided to help, I see, he said, returning to the guest bedroom. The sooner we pack you up and send you home, the sooner you can start making babies for me, Rory said firmly. There's no way that woman is going to be the only one to carry your baby. I see, so jealous, huh? I didn't go through all this, Jeff, so I wouldn't be angry knowing that you made children with other women when you know that's what I always wanted, Rory fumed, furiously folding his clothes and roughly placing them on the pile that was forming. Well, how about we settle down at home, and then we'll make love? I'm sure this fertile womb will give birth to little Rorys quickly, Jeff said thoughtfully, stroking her belly. Do you promise? Rory asked, rubbing her ass against his groin. Have I ever lied to you? Jeff whispered. No, you must want to make children for me. I'm going to be your wife as soon as you're free of this woman, Rory said in a satisfied tone. Like we planned before you had to become a hero, she joked, hugging him. Now let's finish packing, and then I'll take care of you like I promised, Rory purred. Eve didn't come home that night. Instead, she decided to stay with her sister. She couldn't meet Jeff or Mike as she knew him, knowing he had another woman in their house. This was normal for Jeff. This gave him extra time to catch up with the woman he left behind, which lasted until midnight. Mike, can we talk? Eve asked, watching him and a stranger she had never seen before pack containers in their entryway. What is it, Eve? Jeff asked, raising his hand as Rory began to speak, watching as she walked into the garage, stomping her feet angrily. I see you're moving, Eve remarked. No, I'm coming home, Jeff corrected her. But I thought reading was your home, Eve said, confused, her eyes darting an angry look at the stranger as she grinned. Who is she anyway? Rory asked animatedly. She was waiting to deal with the woman who mistreated her man. I'm the one Mike using his false name so Eve couldn't track down Jeff. If she wanted a second chance with him, should have married first. I am the one who will make sure that he never needs another woman again. This is who I am. Oh, pain filled her eyes at Rory's words. I signed the papers. I'm not going to fight you for divorce. I brought it to this myself. I'm so sorry for what I did to us. I don't know what came over me. I still don't understand how that person was able to deceive me so much that I betrayed you. Forgive me for being so weak. I hope in time you can forgive me for what I did. It was never your fault. I was the one who couldn't keep my vows, Eve said, walking up to him and placing her hand on his chest, feeling the man who once captured her heart. Knowing that this is the last time she will be able to do this, feeling that when he leaves, she will never see him again. I hope you find happiness wherever you go, and I will never forget you, she said, standing on her toes and kissing her soon-to-be ex-husband, feeling this connection for the last time, which she voluntarily destroyed with her selfishness. I will send your lawyer a check for the house when it sells. I hope you stay safe wherever you go. Maybe in time we can remain friends. I may have cheated on you, Mike, but that doesn't mean I didn't love you. I may have gone blind because of Stan's words, but that love is still there. Take care of him because I couldn't, as a wife should have. Goodbye, Mike. I will never forget you, Eve said, seeing Rory nod before she walked away to her car and drove to work with tears in her eyes. Come on, we have a lot of packing, Rory said, pulling Jeff's hand. With containers loaded and locked, they waited for the arrival of U-Haul employees who would whisk them away on their cross-country journey. Jeff's pen ran over the name of his car, hearing it scrape as the ball slid across the paper on the hood of his car. Gave the keys to one of my former coworkers who bought it for half of what Jeff did just so he could sell it quickly so his coworker's son would have something to drive. Shaking the man's hand as he tossed the keys into the hand of a very happy teenager. Nodding to the man as he said to call if Jeff ever needed help with anything. Jeff may not have been part of their fraternity, but he earned their trust by keeping his mouth shut and giving a few alibis when the cops came asking questions. The rumble of motorcycle engines filled the morning airwaves as Rory and Jeff pulled into the driveway for their multi-day journey back to Rio Rancho. They spent last night in the house so they could have a full day of travel before they had to stop for the night. "Are you ready to go home?" Rory asked, looking at Jeff as he pulled on his sunglasses. "Where is my seat?" "Oh, hell yes," Jeff replied with a warm smile. "Good, because you'll never leave me again," Rory stated with steely determination as she shifted the bike into first gear and followed by Jeff as she rode out. How Rory loved seeing him driving next to her on the highway. That feeling of completion filled her heart when she saw him in his 46 flathead. The way the wind played on his clothes as they just sped down the road at 65 miles an hour. Although the trip from Reading, Pennsylvania to Rio Rancho, New Mexico only took a little over 27 hours, they stopped every 10 hours to give their bodies a rest from the long drive they had both endured together. When they stopped, after refueling their bikes and bodies, Rory and Jeff could be heard passing by the guests of the motel they were staying at, as they were not exactly quiet. It was around 2 o'clock in the afternoon when Jeff and Rory pulled into his parents' driveway. Jeff lowered the stand, saw that the capsules were already ahead of them, saw shadows moving behind the curtains. She held out her hand to Rory, who didn't hesitate to fill it as soon as she got off the bike. A warm, loving smile touched his lips as his mother ran out of his childhood home, screaming his name, arms outstretched, and ran towards him, with his father quickly following behind. Jeff felt a little embarrassed when his mother peppered his face with kisses in her excitement, rubbing her back as she just rocked him, hugging him tightly after 7 years of not seeing him. His father took his face, his eyes skimming over it, studying the man Jeff had become in this exile before he, too, gave his son a long, tight hug. The two brothers looked at each other, knowing that it was Adam's stupidity that caused his brother to disappear from their lives when he tried to be like his older brother. But he was not cut out for a life of crime. However, that didn't stop them from sharing a warm hug after Jeff got a good look at the man his brother had turned into. "You're not planning to run away again, are you?" Cadden asked in a teasing tone as she led her son back into the house, who missed his presence. "No, Mom, I hope I'm home forever," Jeff replied, looking at Rory, who gave him her knowing smirk. Okay, no more running away. My heart can't handle this," Cadden said, gently stroking her son's arm. "Have you two eaten?" his father asked, looking at both of them, not mentioning the way Rory was holding on to his son. He knew that the moment she discovered where Jeff was, nothing would stop her from bringing him home. "No, Mr. Briggs, we drove almost non-stop this morning," Rory said with a warm smile on her lips. "Adam, help me fire up the grill and we'll feed your bellies," his father said in a loving tone. "Tell me, do you have some of these sausages?" Jeff pleaded. It was the only thing he'd missed, besides his family and Rory, since he'd run away to Reading. "I think so," his father nodded with a grin. "Do you want one or two?" "Two. We've been starving since we skipped breakfast," Jeff chuckled, patting his stomach. "We'll go and sit down comfortably, and I'll bring you something to wet your throats," Cadden said affectionately. "Now tell me all about where you've been living for the last 7 years," Cadden said, sinking into the chair across from them as she served them their drinks. It was late at night when Jeff and Rory went to her apartment, but they were guilty of spending the night at his parents' house just so they could all have a warm breakfast together. After breakfast and an hour or two where Jeff and Adam hung out for a bit, showing their older brother what he'd done with his life since leaving town, Rory took Jeff to her place, to their apartment, and they made love. Then Jeff and Rory went to her father's house. His whole old gang was there. They were informed of his return. Rory's father knew all about the equipment of the store where Jeff worked after fleeing Rio Rancho. He knew Jeff's character, so he knew Jeff could be trusted with the gang's money and motorcycles. The building already belonged to Rory's father. He was simply waiting for Jeff to return before retooling it as a front for money laundering. He knew his daughter was trying to keep Jeff out of gang life again, and he respected that. Still, he needed someone he could trust inside the store to keep an eye on the business. Plus, he had two people who were injured and could no longer ride with them, but they were still part of the gang. They would work under Jeff's direction to ensure everything was kosher. A month and a few weeks later, Rory and Jeff tied the knot, as they should have when they turned 18. Although the shop had a rocky start, Jeff soon began to grow it and produce motorcycles that were selling almost as fast as they could produce them. Rory still worked at the same hospital, but when they had their first child, a daughter, she decided to look for another hospice job that didn't require long hours and paid better than what the hospital was offering, so she could spend as much time as possible with their child. 2 years later, their son was born. One could say it was a happy marriage, but like all marriages, it was a work in progress. They argued, fought, and threw things, but in the end, their love never faded. What happened to Eve, you ask? After she came home and found everything related to Mike missing from the house, she broke down, especially when she received a divorce decree in the mail. She ended up quitting her job and moving north, where she found a suitable job in Buffalo. In the early days of the divorce, she actually wondered how Mike was doing, if the woman she saw treated him right, and so on. So, on a warm day, 5 years after their divorce, Eve met a rather shy and charming man and told him what happened to her marriage and why it fell apart. She didn't embellish anything. She didn't lie about what she did. She didn't badmouth Mike. She ruined one marriage with her lies and had no intention of doing it again. After not hearing from him for several days, Eve was saddened, thinking that she had scared him off, only to find him standing at her door on the third night after her confession. Eve knew he kept a close eye on her for a month after that, but she was never going to be that stupid again. If she had another chance at happiness, she was going to use it well. A year later, they got married. They had 3 children and lived happily together until Eve's death from a heart attack at the age of 68. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.